The North Florida TPO is committed to shaping our transportation future. We're focused on planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, connected community. Learn more at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Good morning and welcome to First Coast Connect. I'm Al Emmerich, sitting in for host Ann Schindler. Today, a local advocacy group supporting First Coast residents with physical and intellectual disabilities celebrates 60 years. We'll look at how Medicaid impacts their work and discuss current legislation being proposed. Then, poisoning is the second leading cause of unintentional injury-related deaths among children. What hidden dangers are lurking in your kitchens and cabinets? And visual artists and choreographers unite to celebrate women in the arts. Join the conversation by giving us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org or tag us on social. It's all ahead this hour after the day's news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. The White House National Security Council says it's reviewing top Trump administration officials' use of a commercial messaging app to talk about upcoming U.S. military strikes in Yemen. Journalist Jeffrey Goldberg was inadvertently added to that chat. He left the chat after realizing what he thought was a hoax was real-time military information. It was being discussed in highly insecure channels. NPR's Greg Myrie says the administration officials should have been using a special room for these conversations, known as a SCIF.
These airstrikes against the Houthis in Yemen began on a Saturday afternoon, so officials may not have been near a SCIF, but it doesn't mean they should be discussing the launch of a major U.S. military operation in real time on their phones on a commercial messaging app.
NPR's Greg Myrie reporting. Some of the people on that text chain reportedly included the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, and CIA Director John Ratcliffe. Both are supposed to appear today at a pre-scheduled hearing before the Senate Intelligence Committee. Ukrainian officials say they will meet again today with U.S. officials to discuss talks about a ceasefire with Russia. NPR's Eleanor Beardsley reports the U.S. delegation met yesterday with Russian officials.
At the top of Russia's agenda with the U.S. was a ceasefire in the Black Sea. That's because it's one of the places where Ukraine has caused real pain for the Kremlin, chasing Russia's Black Sea fleet from its base in Crimea. So far, the Kremlin has refused a comprehensive ceasefire and continues to attack Ukraine's cities. In his nightly address, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Russia remains the only actor dragging out the war. To push Russia toward peace, he said, the world needs to apply pressure on Russia, which means sanctions, and give support to Ukraine. Eleanor Beardsley, NPR News, Kyiv.
President Trump has a new nominee to run the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. His initial choice was withdrawn from consideration. NPR's Ping Huang reports the new nominee has recent CDC experience.
Susan Menares has served as the CDC's acting director since January. She's kept the agency running while also overseeing the implementation of executive orders that led to public data sets being pulled from the agency's website and a round of firings targeting temporary and probationary employees. In a post on Truth Social announcing Menares' choice to lead CDC on a permanent basis, Trump said she would work closely with Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to address the chronic disease epidemic. Menares previously worked in leadership at the Federal Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health. She'll now face a Senate confirmation hearing. The White House withdrew the previous nominee, Dr. Dave Weldon, after some Republican lawmakers balked at his anti-vaccine views. Ping Huang, NPR News.
On Wall Street in pre-market trading, Dow futures are higher. This is NPR.
You're listening to WJCT News, 89.9 in Jacksonville. Good morning, I'm Stephen Ponson. It's 9:04. A local barbecue restaurant is closing its Jacksonville Beach location after 4 years of operation. Owners of the Bearded Pig say on Facebook that they plan to close the Jack's Beach Eatery April 6th. and put their energy into the San Marco restaurant on Kings Avenue, which they say is thriving. Many of their Beaches employees will be folded into the San Marco staff. Age verification may soon be a requirement to access social media in Florida. A federal judge recently rejected a request by tech companies to block Florida's law that keeps minors off certain sites. Social media attorney Timothy Shields says the tech groups failed to show which platforms would be affected under the law.
None of those companies said we would be harmed by this law. Constitutional Law 101, the court can only act on behalf of people who are injured.
Florida's social media ban requires tech companies to delete accounts of users under 14. Shields says the latest court ruling means the state can start implementing the ban. It was supposed to start in January, but officials agreed to postpone the date until after the hearing. It's going to be a beautiful day of weather here in Jacksonville. We'll have sunny skies this afternoon. Highs will reach the upper 70s to lower 80s across the area, and we will have calm winds. Mostly clear tonight with lows getting down into the upper 50s. More sunshine in the forecast tomorrow with highs reaching the lower 80s.
Support for NPR comes from the Skoll Foundation, dedicated to powering social innovators to transform the world. Learn more at skoll.org. And Jarl and Pamela Mohn, focusing on civil liberties, foster youth, public radio, and the arts.
This is First Coast Connect on a beautiful, beautiful Tuesday, and today we're going to have some beautiful conversation. Starting off with the future of some federal and state programs that remain uncertain. We're going to discuss how Medicaid directly impacts First Coast residents with physical and intellectual disabilities. Later in the program, this is going to be a shocker for some of you, I think. I know it was for me. Household items that mimic juices and candies are raising alarms for poison control officials. Never thought I'd have that conversation, but we will. But first, a local advocacy group supporting individuals with disabilities is celebrating 60 years, and how Medicaid changed the way patients can access these services is a topic that's in front of a lot of different people. And to talk about that is the guru, and I welcome you, Kari Bates, President and CEO of the ARC Jacksonville, to the WJCT studios.
Thank you, Al. Happy to be here.
It is great to have you. First of all, Kari, for those that may not be familiar with ARC, as it is commonly called, can you give us an overview of ARC and what its mission is?
Sure. So, simply put, the ARC Jacksonville supports people with intellectual and developmental disabilities live full, meaningful lives. And we do that by providing a variety of services and also advocating for different needs of people.
Gotcha. So when you're talking about the services that you provide, how broad are these services? Because it's day programs, living, the whole nine yards, correct?
Yes. So everything we do is about helping people thrive. That obviously is, if you think about all of our lives from start to finish, from birth to death, it includes everything. So there are, oftentimes I say our services are much deeper than they are wide, because we take care of some people from the time they wake up until the time they go to sleep. So we have residential supports for people who require that type of support from staff. We have independent living for people who are able to really thrive in the community and work in the community and just need a little extra support or perhaps even access to socialization to thrive. We have employment supports for people who work in the community but need perhaps coaching on an ongoing basis to maintain their employment. So the goal there is oftentimes to get and then keep employment. We have day programs that serve as respite for families, as well as life skills training and just meaningful socialization for many participants. We do everything from mental health to work-based training to just anything you can imagine. Community integration in its fullest form. We have a college program at UNF and a partnership with FSCJ so that people with intellectual and developmental differences can have the same college experience we all have, and also the same opportunities to advance their careers that we all have through the FSCJ program. So it really is just a depth of programs, but at the end of the day, it is just about helping people thrive and live their best life. And just like for all of us, it's different for everyone, so we have to have quite a few options to make that happen.
And that's really the misnomer I I think, isn't it? That people don't realize that persons with these challenges, um, many live typical lives, meaning typical lives in the sense of they go to work, they live, they buy groceries. Talk a little bit about the community, because to visit the ARC Jacksonville is to see at face value a community that looks like any other. And to then walk through the community, it's like any other. And except that people are a little more friendly than most people.
Yes, yes.
So kind of break that down, because it's really about the reality of real people leading real lives.
Yes. I remember when I was early in my career, one of my mentors said to me, it's like seeing human nature on full display all day. And I think that is exactly what it is. Everything we see and we talk about are the same things we experience. It might be, relationship struggles, people who are less social than others and, don't want to be bothered, people who are more social and want to hang out. And it's just like everyone else, you just might see it a little more because they oftentimes our clients have staff support, so we're in their life. But I think it's a great lesson in human nature, and you see some of the interactions and you know them in your own life. We may just not be often as honest with ourselves about it.
Yeah.
So, but it's generally, some of the most fun, happy connections with people that you can have. And then there's also all the things that we all experience that aren't fun and happy, and breakups and losing jobs and getting jobs and wanting to buy a house and going through the struggles of trying to do that, or live alone or move in with someone. It's all of it. And it's amazing to really reflect on our own humanity through the lens of people with intellectual differences.
I think that was so beautifully said. Having had over a decade of experience myself working in that arena, one of the best things I ever heard was, this you hear today, like, oh, social media and everything, you got to be authentic. You got to be authentic. Listen, if you want to learn authenticity, just spend a day with the special needs community, and they just don't know another way. We could talk all day about that, and that's the feel good, and it is feel good. But let's talk about some of the brass tacks. First of all, ARC is both a local as well as a state and a national organization. I want to give folks the framework as we kind of distill down through this information this morning. So just give us the quick arc of the ARC.
Sure. So the ARC Jacksonville is a local not-for-profit. We are our own 501c3. We have a local board of directors. Right now, I have a board of 20 people who I report to and work through to build our strategy. We then affiliate with the ARC of Florida and the ARC of the United States. And the affiliation is mostly on the legislative advocacy front. They're certainly leading our efforts in Tallahassee and Washington, D.C., keeping us informed and really organizing us in that way. It also does allow us a network of professionals so we can learn and share best practices. We've, with the village here in Jacksonville being nationally renowned, we've had the opportunity through both state and national organizations to really share a lot about what we're doing. And I say this really to the credit of people who came long before me, but oftentimes we are the leader of the best practices, and we are the ones sharing and talking. But it gives us a chance to learn from each other. But a huge part of it is the legislative advocacy. We do our fly-ins there. We build our legislative agenda, as a network of people. So those are not direct service organizations. They are member-based organizations that focus on advocacy.
Okay. Now, you're celebrating your 60th anniversary. Medicaid is a central part of the existence of funding for so many folks. Obviously, major headlines about that, both today, past, and future. Help us understand what Medicaid's impact has been on the organization, and also the language of the term med waiver and what that looks like today in your environment.
Yes. So it is interesting as we celebrate the 60th to reflect on when we started in the 60s, it was families that wanted, something for their kids to do during the day, because at that time, obviously, students weren't in school. They didn't have a right to education. They were oftentimes institutionalized, so they may not even have been at home at that point. So the parents just wanted something. And that is, to this day, when we talk about advocacy, families are the root of that. Families know what they need, and families drive our agenda. It's not me. It's what I hear from families I can then represent. But fast forward from the 60s to the 80s, and that's really when Medicaid began to shape our industry. So in 1983, a little girl was born named Katie Beckett, and she contracted encephalitis shortly after she was born. and she ended up on a ventilator for 3 years, and she got to the point where she could go home, but because of Medicaid rules, if she went home, she would lose her Medicaid
Mm.
because of her family's income. She was able to receive the services in home, but she couldn't at home. But they didn't have enough resources to pay for the services at home. So essentially, she was going to be forced to stay in the hospital, which is essentially considered institutionalization. Then President Reagan heard about this and he pressed for what was at that time a deregulation of Medicaid to waive the rules of Medicaid to allow Katie to receive services at home. So that has now become what was called the Katie Beckett waiver. We now call it the Medicaid waiver or the iBudget waiver. And it funds services that someone might typically receive in an institution, but allows them to receive them in the community. So everything I mentioned, day services, residential supports, employment supports,
Right.
are now funded by the iBudget Medicaid waiver, which is appears to roll through the state of Florida, and it does, but it is a federal match, a federal drawdown. So about 60% in Florida, about 60% of the funding actually comes from the feds, 40% comes from the state, and then a state agency administers it.
And so to kind of put that into basic rubric of ABC 1, 2, 3, these services that the individuals need are able to be received in the community, potentially in their home, in your community, but also, and I know we're not going to get into the heavy data here, but all the data that I'm aware of supports that also improves the ability to thrive because they're not in an quote unquote institution, correct?
Yes, it is obviously much better quality of life to be in your community, to be with your family and your friends, and it is less expensive. So it's a win-win. But it took a waiver of the rules for that to be allowed to happen. And now it's not an entitlement program. So people do have to go on, they have to apply. They have to go on to what is now called a pre-enrollment list. We encourage people to do that as early as possible because while you might not have full services, you are accessing some services even while you're on the pre-enrollment list. So we do encourage, but around, I think 35,000 people in Florida receive Medicaid waiver services. There's around 20,000 people on the wait list right now.
Say that again.
Around 35,000 people receiving services and around 20,000 are on the wait list for services.
And that wait list, you don't get on that wait list unless somebody passes or leaves or ages out.
You don't get off the wait list oftentimes unless from the wait list to services. Oftentimes that is driven by crisis. I will say that there has been a lot of movement at the state level in the last few years. They have added additional recurring dollars every year to roll more people off. So we've seen a spike in enrollment in the last year. We're following that closely. We're really excited about it. I was in Tallahassee in February, and the legislature was heavily focused on that wait list because they hear from families constantly who are desperate,
Yeah.
families who are trying to work, families who have children with severe autism, and they're trying to maintain a job and a life and their other kids' life. So the legislature hears those stories, and they are acting, and they're very interested in, I think, really trying to provide services to more people.
Well, and what so many people don't realize is that once an adult or once an individual reaches the age of 21, I think 22, services stop.
Yes.
They are now on their own. And for so many of those, I mean, imagine having a child with disabilities, autism, other impacts to their life, and all of a sudden now you can't get the services you need. And it's not like you have this choice. It's just boom. That's the way it is.
Yes, we call it the cliff. It is a cliff. At the age of 22, all education-based services stop, and so then your option is to go on to the pre-enrollment list and wait, which in past years, I do believe this is getting better. I mean, that wait could be 10 to 15 years. So that's where families really struggle to maintain their own employment and their own life. But then moving forward, I think there's going to be quicker access. It might not be as crisis-based, but that has historically been.
So let's do that. Let's move forward in the sense. And thank you for just really taking such a broad, complex topic and distilling it down. Now, the Florida legislature is currently in session. There's a plethora of bills that would benefit people with disabilities if they passed. I'd like to talk about advocacy as a process and a practice, right? Because advocacy, even if you're not somebody who is directly impacted, you are potentially indirectly impacted in your community by Medicaid and also what's going on. So one such bill, for example, would allow the administration of insulin in group homes. Now, there's a father, Anthony Mancuso, who testified recently, last week, as a matter of fact. His 35-year-old son, Adam, has developmental and intellectual disabilities and is diabetic. Let's take a quick listen.
We were 2 weeks away from putting him in when our endocrinologist stated that his diabetes, which he has developed where he needs to have a small insulin shot. We didn't think much of that at the time until we tried to put him into the home. And we were told, no, he can no longer go into the home because he requires a shot, that we had two options. The family could give it, or it can go into a nursing home.
Okay. So, wow. First of all, I'm a type 1 diabetic. Couldn't even imagine. What I'd like to focus on here is you've kind of set up the reason the Medicaid waiver exists, but then there's all these other nuanced rules that come up, and now all of a sudden they have to be dealt with. And thus, walk us through what it looks like from a parent or organization that seeks to challenge and make change, and how that becomes proposed legislation in your space.
Yes, I think this is a perfect example of advocacy in the legislative process in its purest form. This dad encountered this very real obstacle, and we have seen it on our end as operating the community homes that he speaks about, where someone has kind of a simple thing, but because the way the rules are written, there's not much we can do. We can't admit the person, we can't help the family. And so oftentimes we're talking to ARC Florida about, these are the rules that we see that need to be looked at, and we kind of have to build some consensus around it and prioritize because there's so much all the time. But in this case, the dad really started reaching out, and the dad started telling a story. And then the ARC of Florida and other advocacy groups kind of led the charge on helping develop the language for a rule change that will allow, in this case, if it passes, it will allow for our homes to administer insulin in a very controlled, staff being trained way, very straightforward way. But it's a little rule that impacted this individual's life in a major way.
Yeah.
And he wasn't the only one. But because the dad was aggressive enough and willing to, just connect to people and just advocate in a way that only a parent can do, I think oftentimes, it really allowed us to build a platform around that. And those are things that we don't always know. I know, from my end, things that make our life harder or don't seem fair to people, but I don't always know exactly what families are dealing with, especially in the younger years, if they don't tell us. And that's really should be what drives the legislative process. It is from the people, for the people, obviously. So that example just kind of shows someone starts a conversation and it's going to impact many more people. It's not just going to help his son. There are, I'm sure, hundreds of people in that situation. And so that's how it starts. And there's lots of different, there's a ton of bills that we're tracking at the state level right now that we think will really positively impact people. And there's a lot of support around those.
Yeah, and I'd like to unpack a couple of those bills, but first, an invitation. We are talking with Kari Bates, President and CEO of ARC Jacksonville, the largest organization in the city serving persons with disabilities. And our focus today, we've been talking about Medicaid. We're now kind of talking about the current legislative session. If you'd like to join in with a specific question for Kari, we'd love to have you join us. 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. or reach out on social media, and we'll see if we can pop a question in for you. So with the session now in process, what are some of the bills you're watching that you just referenced to? And are there any specifically, Kari, that are kind of maybe affecting us here in the First Coast, or is it more broad?
So I think both. It's going to be locally and broadly. So I'll talk about more of the non-money ones first, I guess I'll say. And I think we are expecting the budget to come out in the next few days. So we are really, looking forward to that. There's some financial concerns around the system and how we have staff and people who are able to provide these services. So as great as it is, and we're advocating and hope we'll see more people rolled off of that pre-enrollment wait list we talked about, if there are not staff able to work and provide services when people get off of that wait list, the wait list is essentially an empty waiver.
Can't serve.
So that is a budgetary concern that we're following. But there's actually a couple that I'll mention. House Bill 377, Senate Bill 756, health insurance coverage for individuals with developmental disabilities. So currently, for someone in Florida to be eligible for certain medical benefits for autism, they have to be diagnosed before the age of 8. And that oftentimes doesn't always happen, especially with women. Women or females, for whatever reason, are diagnosed a little later, so it disproportionately impacts them. So if they're diagnosed after 8, they are not eligible for any of the typical autism services. So this bill would actually amend the language to allow for for coverage following the medical definition, what actually isn't tied to an age at all. It's just a medical definition. That would be huge for families because
Yeah.
right now they're oftentimes people aren't always, we're getting better at diagnosis, but we know that we're not always diagnosing as early as we'd like to. And then another one that I'm kind of excited about is Senate Bill 500, House Bill 711, which is the Spectrum Alert System. So we all are familiar with Code Silver's things for elopement, people who are, maybe unknowingly missing or running away. And we know that we hear terrible stories of kids, specifically with autism,
Yeah.
who are attracted to water drowning. And so this is looking at actually developing a similar, it would be part of that system. It would be its own color type system alert to increase a rapid response. And that's something we're really looking at locally too. I am partnering, and there'll be more coming out in the next few months with our local aging provider because we see this in both dementia and autism on how we can develop a really good response to help minimize the tragic stories we hear about too often.
So I know there's a lot of bills probably we could talk. I do want to give a chance. We've got Janet at the Beaches who has a question for us. So Janet, I'd love for you to join in this morning and please provide us with your question.
Okay, this is a question that I've had for a long time, but my son, when he was going off to college, he developed schizophrenia, and I was wondering, does ARC do anything for people with a mental illness like that became disabled, developmentally disabled at the age of 18? Is there any help for them with ARC? Because a lot of the assisted living facilities and places with people with mental health are real dumps. There's no, they're all for a private organization or privately owned, and they're not very nice, and they take all their money and they put them to a room.
Thank you very much. We're gonna take care of and answer that question for you. So Kari, mental health. That's always a coinciding occurrence.
Yes.
Just specifically to her question, though, what would your answer be?
It would depend. So we're focused on people with intellectual and developmental differences or disabilities primarily. We have a program focused on dual diagnosis. So around a third of the people that we support also have a mental health diagnosis. So we do have people, it would just depend on, without knowing the specifics of his situation,
Sure.
he doesn't have to necessarily meet the Medicaid definition of an intellectual disability, but it would have to be a fit because we do a lot in groups, and I would want it to be meaningful for him and for everyone else. But we certainly have people at the Village who are living with significant mental health challenges, well managed. And then we just opened a community home a year ago that specifically focused on a dual diagnosis of an intellectual disability and a mental health diagnosis.
And I think it's important to note, and I don't want to go off scope, but one of the beautiful things that ARC does as well is the support for families, because so many of the families are also dealing with their own version of mental health challenges, depression and such. We've only got a couple more moments, and I still have another question for you. Any other bills you just want to highlight really quickly, or did you hit the main ones? Or?
Nope, I think I got the main ones.
Okay, great. When we think about leadership through these times in Jacksonville, the state legislature seems statewide to be really, really supportive of this issue and disabilities. What's driving that?
Yes, so both the Speaker of the House and the Senate President are extremely supportive of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Speaker of the House has a close connection, a brother with a disability, and he speaks of that with passion. And, we're watching, I would say, both the federal and the state level. Medicaid funding, as I mentioned, does flow through the federal level. And when we talk about these community-based services, I think it is important for people to realize that oftentimes Medicaid includes more than the typical medical insurance. So employment supports, all of that is part of the Medicaid bucket. So we're certainly advocating at the federal level to protect people with disabilities as we look at Medicaid reform, which most people, know that there needs to be some reform. Our concern is that our population doesn't get left behind. But the state level, we feel like we have tremendous amount of support right now, a lot of interest. There have been, many hearings and meetings on not just how to, expand services and serve more people, but how to improve the services that people are getting and being sure that when someone does receive a service, they get it in the right way. And that really, the heart of that, and we hear this from parents and everyone, is being sure when someone, first, they get funded for services, and second, that there are then people who are able to provide those services. And I feel like we're very optimistic about the future. People see the value in what we do and the individuals we support, and I can't imagine a more deserving population, honestly.
Kari, you're stewarding against four winds that are immense. There's many of your peers facing some of the same challenges, and I commend you just immensely. Kari Bates, thank you so much for being here. The time always goes too fast. Coming up next, as Floridians, we know the risks that come with extreme heat and certain creepy crawlies, but there's another hidden danger that actually might be closer than you realize. We'll talk about it in a moment. Welcome back to First Coast Connect, and this is a little bit of a shocker here. First of all, every day in the U.S., 5 infants, children, and teens lose their lives to unintentional poisoning. Okay, that's not happy by any stretch of the imagination, and that's according to the CDC. Not a shocker, though. But what's the heartbreaking reality is that even more alarming, poisoning ranks as the second leading cause of accidental injury deaths among young people. And to shed some light on this, and what every parent and guardian should really know, is Mike McCormick, the Media Relations and Education Coordinator for the Florida Poison Information Center, FPIC, I think, if I'm an acronym it up right. Did I do that right?
You did it right.
FPIC?
Yep.
Right? Okay, great. I want to sound like I'm in the know.
You got it.
And we got to talk about a heavy topic, so let's just light with some humor. Mike, thanks for joining us on the program today.
It's good to see you again, Al.
You too, my friend. People don't really realize how dangerous poisons are, do they?
No, it's crazy. I was a journalist for 35 years before moving into this career, and I did not understand the impact of poisonings. Just in Florida, we just crunched the full data for last year. 131,000 plus calls to the 3 poison control centers in Florida. Nationally, it's almost 2 million calls, a little more than 2 million, actually. It means a poison control phone rings somewhere in the United States every 15 seconds. So that just gives you some context on how big a deal. And most people, I think of poison control as children. Yeah. And obviously we focus a lot on it because in Florida, it's about 37% of our calls. And when I say children, that's under 6. But 63% of our calls, I always like to point out, are from 6 to 120. So poisoning really does impact all ages of life.
What do we know are the biggest dangers in Florida?
So, in Florida, if we look at all age groups coming together, overwhelmingly analgesics, which are pain medicine, are number one. And this is what a lot of people don't realize. When I'm talking about pain medicine, obviously that's going to include opioids and stuff like that. But actually the things we get more calls about are acetaminophen and Motrin. So it's common everyday over-the-counter pain medicine that you have in the house. And the reason we get that is because we have so much of it. You carry it in your purse or your backpack. You might have some in the kitchen. You have it in the nightstand. You have it in the bathroom. It's in a lot of places. So it has the potential to end up in the wrong hands. And then 2, as we've seen with COVID, RSV, the quademic going on, a lot of people will get cold and cough medicine that may already have a full dose of acetaminophen in it and then think, well, I have a fever, and then go take some Tylenol on top of that. And you can very quickly get into a situation where you have too much of the drug in your system.
Why are, and first of all, explain THC poisonings. What does that term refer to again, just so everybody can understand?
So THC is the active ingredient in marijuana. It's called Delta-9 THC. Yep. And then there is also another 100 cannabinoids that come from the cannabis plant. So out of the hemp plant, they have made a series of other Delta THCs that a lot of times the teens call them weed light or diet weed. And those are actually legal to sell under the 2018 Agriculture Act. Yep. So you can end up buying edibles in your local corner store, convenience store, smoke shops that can end up going into homes. And these do have some slight psychoactive effects, but they're bigger when they hit especially the young children. And that's something that we spend a lot of time educating about, to make sure that if you are buying these products, you do need to treat it just like it is, heart medication, so that you do want to keep it locked up so children can't get their hands on it.
All right, so let's just rewind for a minute, because if you haven't gone out to ever purchase THC or the gummies, if you will, you may just think, oh, you can only buy those with your medical license in the state of Florida. But now you can buy them at Walgreens or wherever you go, your store. And so we're really talking about this risk between, so far you've highlighted very common threats that are right in front of you every single day. And so Why do you think that these are creeping up so fast for children? And is it just that the prevalence and the sudden jump? Is it the lack of knowledge? What are you hearing is the why behind this?
Well, I think we see two things on, or three things on this very easily. One, its prevalence, as you said. Anything we see where we get more of a product available, we see more poisonings. A really good one would be the GLP-1 receptor drugs like Ozempic. We've seen an explosion in overdoses on those drugs because there's more of it available. So we see more of these Delta products available. And by the way, it's not just Delta 8. There's a Delta 10, there's a Delta 11, there's a THCO. We continue to come out with more and more of these products as gummies, candies, and so forth. So more are available. Second, because it is legal to buy in a smoke shop or a convenience store, people don't put the same potential danger thought on them. And then third, the reason we see it, because they are made in these edible products and easy to get into. Technically, a dose for one of these Delta 8, so these hemp-based edibles, which is different than the medical marijuana edibles, a dose would be one gummy. And I've got to ask you a question. If you had a 5-year-old come in and find a bowl full of these, who's going to eat just one?
Yeah. Wow.
And you know what? We do see it occasionally with adults too. Typically more that is going to be a Delta 9. So either a medical marijuana, or if somebody brings in from one of the states that have recreational, we will run into that. An edible takes about 30 minutes before you're going to start feeling the impact. So again, like with a candy bar, think of like a Hershey bar. So if you had one of those that was an edible, it would be 1 square would be the dose for an adult. Well, somebody takes one, they don't feel something, they take another, then it's the cumulative effect of that when that comes on.
You said, I go to packaging, which I know we'll talk about in a moment, but you go to the prevalence, yes, but you also look the casual nature. You just don't think of this, and I can just see parents or whatever, family members, brother or sister, just going, hey, I'm going to leave it out with the vitamins, and the kid grabs a counter. Are you seeing an increase in manufacturers taking greater safety measures to make sure that they seal better, or?
Well, we do see with some products, there's more that could be done. Like with edibles, if we put them in individual blister packs, it's going to be hard for a 5-year-old to bounce them out. But that all has to come with regulation before people are going to get into it. And it's interesting you said leave them out with the vitamins. Vitamin poisonings when we come to children. That is actually a thing, and one of the reasons is because so many of the vitamins now are in gummy formats that a kid will jump in and take them. A lot of times when that happens, we still want people to call the Poison Helpline 1-800-222-1222 and talk to one of our medical specialists. A lot of times that's not going to end up a big deal, but if those vitamins have lead in them, or iron in them, that's where we can start to run into an issue. And by the way, it's always okay to call the Poison Helpline. You can just call for a question. It doesn't have to be an emergency.
Yeah, I think that's important to note. I've done it before when I had kids, and I remember for a moment sitting there, and we were going, "Well, should we call?" It's like, should you call? It's like, should you call 911?
Right.
This is your child. Speaking of calls, if you want to join in and jump aboard with a question for Mike today, please do 904-549-2937. You can also email us firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. I was never a big fan of coffee. I became a coffee fan as an adult, and I was shocked when I became a fan and would go into the coffee shops and see basically my kids' peers chugging huge caffeine drinks. And now there's a new study on caffeine. It's pretty concerning for children. Tell us about that.
Well, one of the things that we're seeing, especially is with the explosion of energy drinks, this has become a problem. So, the CDC recommends for an adult not to go more to a maximum of 400 milligrams of caffeine in a day.
Which equates to what?
So, gosh, if we were doing that with coffee, it would be several cups of coffee before you got to it. A Coke has like 34 milligrams, if you think of that as a Coke.
Okay.
Some of these energy drinks now carry 200 milligrams. For a teenager, we don't really want them getting up to that 400. It's more in the 200 milligram range. But some of these energy drinks have become so popular among the teens. We're seeing teens, especially among teen athletes, where they're drinking 2, 3, 4 of these energy drinks, and you can very quickly get into a caffeine toxicity there, where it's going to cause racing heart, a lot of other symptoms that can come down. We had we're in March Madness right now. Just a couple of years ago in the NCAA tournament, the University of Illinois lost one of their players because he chugged 5 Red Bulls before the game and he wasn't able to play.
What is happening from a legislative standpoint and a marketing standpoint? I'm listening to this and I'm thinking about the smoking industry. I'm thinking about the packaging. I believe you have in your hand, I thought it was a drink, just a regular drink. Well, first of all, tell us about that thing. Tell us about what's in it. And then tell us about what's happening between the work you're doing and trying to get the marketers to go, hey, we could potentially be harming kids.
So this is especially concerning. I was talking to one of my buddies out at the beach, Mark, about this just recently. This is a can of Sunny D. And we say Sunny D, we think about that's something our children would drink. It's a little orange juice drink.
Yeah.
But it's made now with vodka in it. And we've seen an explosion of children's brands or children's type drinks that are adding alcohol to them. And again, for an adult that's of age, drinking responsibly, that's fine. But what we run into is when you bring home this can, it ends up in the refrigerator with your other drinks, and it's too easy for children to get their hands on it.
Can I see that real quick?
Yeah, you can.
So
we had a case in the state where a 5-year-old, the family didn't understand the word hard on Hard Mountain Dew meant alcohol, and they let a 5-year-old drink an entire can of alcohol-based Mountain Dew. And for a child, their liver's not made to metabolize alcohol the same way as we are as adults. That ended up in a life and death situation. And luckily, it ended up okay, but the child was hospitalized for a couple of days.
I'm listening to this and I'm going, oh my gosh, I was just worried about making sure I didn't drink the Clorox when I was a kid. And now we've got the coffee. So how do you coach parents and families to have these conversations? And I know you're not a therapy group here, but you are responsible for helping people in crisis. And so as part of your prevention programs, what do those conversations look like? I'm curious to know. And do you see resistance?
We don't typically see resistance. We see it on some things. I've seen some resistance before when I talked about over-the-counter medicines, pain relievers. So you have 2 parents that are working. They feel they do need to leave them for their teens. And so what I always try to talk about is it's fine to leave a couple of pills of acetaminophen if they need it in the afternoon. And if they use it, leave a couple more for the next day.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't have to leave that big box or big container that has 1,000 pills in them. What does education look like? We do it a lot of different ways. We do what we're doing right now. It's about getting out on the media and making people aware as fast as these products come up. We're very lucky. We run the data center for the state of Florida here in Jacksonville. So we in real time can see what is trending.
Mm-hmm.
So when we do have new things pop up, we can immediately get to media. We do a lot of in-person workshops and lectures that I'm out. And we show slides, we show examples to people, and then we're out in the community a lot at different events. One of the big one coming up will be the Jack's Ready Fest, a 2-day event, April 25th and 26th at the Prime Osborne Convention Center. And we will set up with interactive displays where parents can come by and look. I'll put medicine and candy side by side in that and ask people to pick the difference. And it's really eye-opening to people when I do it, that they look at it and they go, you can't tell. I show the THC products next to, I show one that looked like Rice Krispie treats, and I put them down, and the parents look at them and they go, I don't know which one. And I'm like, yeah, that's the point.
Gives a whole scary meaning to the whole Pepsi challenge thing.
Correct.
All right. We've got Kelly in Arlington who's got a question for us. Kelly, welcome to the program.
Hey, thank you. I just wanted to first say how nice the poison control people are. We've called a few times about our kids for various things, and they're always so kind and reassuring. But I wanted to know, who can we write to or call about packaging and making that more clear for kids and adults?
Thank you, Kelly. That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I've got a marketing background. We used to live on the back end of some of this stuff. Who can they call, and what action should they feel empowered to take?
Yeah, first, Kelly, thank you for your kind words about our certified
We didn't pay
poison,
her either, by the way.
specialist. It's awesome to hear that. It's really important to talk to the state legislators because they're going to pass the laws. We actually worked a good part of last year in case Amendment 3 had passed. We spent a lot of time talking about what are the packaging laws that need to go into effect on these on the front end. I think the important thing is that the companies, if we can start on the front end, are going to be more receptive. What they don't want to do is start down a line of packaging and then have to change things, because that becomes very, very expensive. But it's going to start literally with our state reps, our state senators. We've got to get that in their hands.
You know, it's so ironic. We just had Kari Bates from the ARC talking about advocacy. One story is related to the other. It starts with a family. It starts with a person. And I think what I hear you saying that Kari referred to is you do have a voice. It ain't easy. It's not like you just, text somebody and go, hey, can you make this happen? But it starts with that voice. And Kelly, thank you for chiming in. And I think Mike's sage advice is there. But the real thing is to take the action, because it's a long ball game, right?
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? We need people to be vigilant. Last week was National Poison Prevention Week. That started under the Kennedy administration.
Yeah.
And it's great. We can spend a week shining a light on it. But the truth is, we need every day to be Poison Prevention Day.
Yeah, real quickly, just the last couple of minutes, Mike, and I know you know what it's like coming up against the stop.
I do it.
In the news days. Tell us, it's spring cleaning, a lot of dangers. Just a couple of quick reminders for folks.
So the first one is, we want to do the spring clean. We grab all the household products out. It's to keep an eye on them, because children like to mimic what we're doing, and that's where we end up with kids splashing things in their eyes, drinking things they're not supposed to. The other big one is a lot of times when we want to do that big, massive clean, not maybe the regular one we're doing, we want to go to extra effort. And sometimes people will start to mix chemicals. And we definitely don't want to see bleach mixed with ammonia, bleach mixed with vinegar. Both of those can create a dangerous poison gas very quickly. So it's very important also that when you're cleaning bathrooms and stuff, you leave doors open so they're well ventilated. But we're also going to see bites and stings start to increase, whether that's insects, snakes, jellyfish. We start to see people getting out with pesticides. Again, be careful when you're spraying so we're not getting the blowback. Pool maintenance, chlorine, work in, again, well-ventilated spaces so we don't have it up. Cookouts. Make sure that we're cooking our food now as we get out, and make sure you're getting it to the right temperature and not leaving it out. 48 million Americans get food poisoning every single year. And the good thing is, when we talk about poisonings, most of them don't end up fatal. I think when we think poisoning, we think like the movies. But you know what? You don't want to have to go through the sickness, because some of these can be pretty intense.
One more time, that number for people to call.
1-800-222-1222. Please put it in your phone, because you always have that with you.
24/7, it's free, and no apologies. You just kind of make the call. It'll save you time, money, and perhaps a life.
And completely confidential.
There you go. Mike McCormick, thanks for being here. Great seeing you as always. And up next, the 2-day celebration of women supporting women, highlighting the
DuPont Counseling Group is a team of therapists, psychiatrists, and counselors available to help with life's mental health challenges. Everyone needs help sometimes. More information can be found at jacksonvillecounseling.org. The law offices of Phillips, Hunt & Walker proudly support WJCT. Personal injury, criminal defense, and family law. Phillips, Hunt & Walker, committed to justice. 904-444-4444 or floridajustice.com.
I'm Ernest White II. I've traveled the world as host of my TV show Fly Brother, and I'm looking forward to returning to my hometown of Jacksonville and sharing these stories of friendship and the transformative power of travel with you. Join me at WJCT Studios Monday, April 7th for an evening of connecting, food, giveaways, and a sneak peek at Fly Brother Season 4. Go to wjct.org/events for more information about this free event. Let's fly.
In Ghana, thousands of poor migrants are getting sick.
Burna boys that I met complained about coughing up blood at night. They complained that their limbs would lock in a sort of icy sensation. They didn't quite understand why.
The reason is they're hoping to make a few dollars incinerating millions of pounds of your electronic waste. We'll go inside the global waste trade. That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11 on WJCT News 89.9.
The Trump administration is reshaping climate policy and the federal agency charged with protecting the environment. On day one in office, President Trump withdrew the U.S. from the Paris Climate Agreement. Since then, he's rolled back regulations, frozen funds, and he's eyeing deep cuts to the Environmental Protection Agency's staff. How will these changes affect the environment and conservation efforts? That's next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Look at you guys throwing down the funk this morning. I like that. It's a Tuesday morning, First Coast Connect. Welcome back. The third annual Women's Art Exchange celebrates the creative connections among women, featuring over 20 local visual artists, 7 groundbreaking dance companies from across the eastern U.S. across a 2-day event. Joining me here to talk about this event, the power of embracing your creative side, we have 3 wonderfully gifted, talented advocates and rich in talent themselves, who are also planning this cool thing. Emily Cargill. Thank you, Emily, for being with us here this morning.
Yes, thanks for having me.
Emily is the artistic director of Emily Cargill and Dancers and founder of the Women's Art Exchange called WAX. Is that the appropriate acronym?
That's right, Wax and Jax.
Wax and Jax. I just want to make sure, when you have a name like Al, it's like everything else is like, I want to make sure it's the right acronym, because everybody thinks Al is AI nowadays. So it's true. It's a mess. Anna, thank you. Anna Jacobson, English teacher at the Bowles School, a poet, spoken word artist with Women Writing for a Change. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, it is a pleasure. And finally, Amanda Holloway, a art teacher at Global Art School and professional visual artist.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for having us on today.
I have to say, I'm incredibly disappointed because I would love to have about 2 hours to just pick apart all the cool things you do. But we do want to focus today to make sure people really know about this event. So I'm going to start with you, Emily. Tell us about the Women's Art Exchange. What is it?
Yeah, the Women Arts Exchange is a 2-day celebration of women in the visual and performing arts. Kind of what to expect day of. It exists really in 2 halves. So you come in, you'll have on display all the visual local artists that we have presenting for the weekend. We also have a DJ coming to spin vibes and get the party going. We have libations from Ruby Beach Brewing. So that exists for about an hour. And then immediately following that, we have a professional dance concert. And that includes my company, Emily Cargill and Dancers, as well as artists from up and down the East Coast, New York, Richmond, DC, and just a bunch of really awesome, innovative, literally groundbreaking artists coming in.
Well, and from reading everything about it, it really sounds like this is a blend of unique experiences that you not necessarily. When I first read about it, I thought about when we have the international food festivals here. You get to sample all these different types of foods.
Yeah.
This is really about different types of art, and so spoken word and Anna. There are a lot of positive, energetic art forms in Jacksonville. Spoken word has just elevated. Al Letson, of course, such a gift to our community. Tell us about your engagement here and what the spoken word community can gather from this experience.
So I first came to WAX under the auspices of Women Writing for a Change. So they're Jacksonville chapter of a national nonprofit that really looks to celebrate women's voices and to offer publishing opportunities for people who have maybe come to writing through non-traditional means. So 3 years ago, when Emily offered Women Writing for a Change a chance to come in and be part of WAX and to work with the dancers in a collaborative piece that combines the voices of the writers in our community with the movement of these incredible dancers, I was just thrilled to have an opportunity to participate. As a professional word girl, I can barely get across a room. So I have a tremendous, tremendous love for the grace of dance. And honestly, all of the fancy meter and rhyme and rhythm that poets think that we've created, it has its roots in dance. And so dance is basically poetry embodied. And it's just such an honor to be part of it. And it's been a transformative experience.
What a beautiful way to put that together. And by the way, you need to make a T-shirt, Word Woman. It's like, forget Wonder Woman, you're Word Woman. Amanda, Jacksonville is so rich with visual art. What is the visual art experience that community can expect coming to this event?
So it is very well-rounded, the way Emily has put it together. This is my second year as an artist participating, and it's not just the first hour. Yes, the visual arts take, center stage. But it's not just painting, it's not just drawing. There's photography, there's sculpture, there's mixed media. She said that this year there's even going to be somewhat of an interactive video display as well.
Yeah.
So artists of all kinds, and it's not an intimidating type art show either. It's very, family friendly, can be a little bit cliche to say, but it's inviting, it's open, it's warm, it's visual arts of all kinds, open to the public.
I said the time goes really quick, and it does. So it's Friday, March 28th, Saturday, March 29th from 7 to 9:30 at the Jessie DuPont Center, correct?
That's right.
All
Come
right.
join us.
Emily, Anna, Amanda, thank you so very, very much for being here with us this morning. This is really an incredible opportunity, one more opportunity to experience. But I think what's so rich here is that you've brought women together, and you're going to see that women's art perspective. So Emily, Anna, and Amanda, thank you very, very much for being here this morning.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
And what's that date again? One more time?
The date of the show?
Yeah.
March 28th and 29th at the Jessie.
Perfect. That's our program. Thank you for listening. If you've got feedback or suggestions, send them to either First Coast Connect at WJCT.org. If you missed anything, you can also check out the rebroadcast at 8 o'clock tonight. The entire archive at WJCT.org or on your favorite podcast platform. Join us tomorrow when we talk about a new film examining historic labor victory that almost didn't happen and what lessons it offers for the First Coast. I'm Al Emmerich.
First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. Life South Community Blood Centers, providing blood and patient services to the local hospitals, serving patients in this community. Donating blood with Life South helps save lives. More at lifesouth.org to find a blood drive near you.